You remember that nerdy kid, the one in middle school who spent a lot of time on the internet and dressed up in weird costumes? And sure, all that time on the internet and computers netted me a good job, but it wasn't my passion. That passion? Photography. And it turns out that photography was something that was already in my blood. So if you like cameras, film, chemistry, history, adventure, and a little bit of exploration, then I think we're going to get along just fine. Hey there friends, welcome back to the channel. My name's Alex Laux and I have a camera review for you. Yes, I am finally getting around to reviewing the legendary, the iconic, the Nikon F2, the last all-mechanical pro SLR from Nikon. And honestly, probably one of their best mechanical cameras ever produced. So, like always, let's head back to the studio. I'll give you a background of this camera, tell you my impressions, and show you a bit around the functionality. And I'll meet you right back here in a few. Nikon can trace its corporate history to 1917, formed from a merger of three major optical manufacturers in Japan. Camera production started in the post-war era with a line of rangefinder Nikon cameras. Notably, 1957's Nikon SP would form the foundation of Nikon's first system SLR, the Nikon F, released in 1959. The F proved to quickly change the game in professional photography market, especially in the world of photojournalism. Despite its near overnight success, the F was not without its flaws, and Nikon listened to its customers and put many of their suggestions into the next model. The Nikon F2 hit markets in 1971 and smoothed out a lot of the rough edges. The F2 was designed to work with a metered prism, so the battery was designed around the modern silver cell and was on the camera body itself. The removable back was replaced by a standard door that could still be taken off and made film loading far easier, as you don't need to find somewhere to stash that back while loading up and losing it. The initial release saw a meterless prism, a waist level finder, and a metered DP1 finder. The first update came in 1973 with the release of the DP2, or better known as the F2S, which worked in the same way but had an LED readout instead of match needle. In 1976, the DP3 hit the market and updated the photo cell with a silicon blue for the F2SB. While the DP3 would be short-lived, in 1977, the DP11 allowed for the new AI-style f-mount lenses to work seamlessly with the F2, and the F2A was born, but it returned back to that match needle display. Nikon quickly corrected that with the DP12 or the F2AS finder that same year, which is the same as the 11 but used an LED readout. Because the finders were interchangeable, updating your base F2 body was as simple as installing a new metering head. But that wasn't all. Nikon also released two auto exposure accessories that allowed for aperture priority metering for the DP11 and 12 heads, plus a new MD2 motor drive, battery pack, a 250-shot magazine, and Nikon also released two special editions, the F2 Titan with a titanium body, and a 25th anniversary version. Production of the F2 ceased in 1980 with the release of the Nikon F3. Although the move to electronics did distance Nikon from their customer base, sales of the F2 did continue, with many professionals continuing to prefer the F2 over the F3. Alright, so here it is. This is the Nikon F2. Now, the version that I have on loan to me from Bill Smith is the original one. This is better known as the Nikon F2 Photomic because it has the DP1 metering head. The one thing I really like about the F2 is that it is a hefty camera. There's a lot of weight to this thing, and it actually feels really comfortable to hold in your hand. Now, hand holding it like this, it seems a little bit over the top, but trust me, when you're out in the field and have this around your neck, you really don't feel it, especially if you have it on a good strap. And even this base Nikon strap is not too shabby. What I really like is that Nikon seemed to play their own game when designing their metering heads. They don't look like a standard pentaprism finder that would be typical of the age. I'm thinking, of course, like the stuff you're seeing out of Canon, Minolta, even Pentax. They had a very angular one where Nikon kind of does a flat surface and kind of an asymmetry to them. It's really refreshing, and again, it harkens back to the original metered finders for the original Nikon F that were this big thing again with that asymmetrical appearance. It really makes the camera itself stand out. Now, this is an all black version, and I do like the joke that basically says that all black cameras take better photos. I personally don't believe that, but you know what? Whatever. When I was running with one of these several years ago, I had the two-tone version with the chrome, with the black and the black finder on top, and that really looked handsome. They are really nice looking cameras. Heavy, yes, but ultimately well balanced. These are cameras that you can definitely hit someone with, and it will hurt them more than it will hurt the camera. And if I had to choose between using an f2 on the regular and an F, it would definitely be an f2, simply because there are a lot more modern conveniences with the f2 that I'm much more familiar with, mostly with the standard film door. I've seen one of these with the battery pack and the MD2 motor drive, and those things are absolute monsters. I really don't know who would want to do that unless you were someone who was shooting with that big 250 shot magazine, which requires that drive to be installed. And I've also seen the other finder heads, and they do get a little bit chunkier over time, but I really like just this original Photomic finder. I would love to try my hands at one of the unmetered prism heads for this to see really how it compares to the metered finder. But yeah, the one complaint I do have is the fact that it doesn't have a standard hot shoe on it, and I can kind of understand why, given that the finder can be removed and all that. Instead, it uses a something that fits over your film rewind lever, and that either adds a standard hot shoe or a dedicated Nikon flash. But as I don't shoot a lot of flash, it's really no big deal. All right, let's take a closer look at some of the functionalities of the F2. All right, and here we are with the Nikon F2. The camera itself is fairly simple to use and operate, but there are a few things about it that are slightly different from something a little more modern, like Nikon F3. And first of all, right on the bottom here, we have the compartment here. This is for your batteries, and then this little groove here is great for a 5 yen Japanese coin, or it works really well with a Canadian nickel. Also on the bottom, you have the connection here for the MD2 motor drive, and that's your sprocket release for when you go to rewind your film. To open the film back, the control is right here on the bottom, and you flip up this little thing and you twist it, and that opens the back. Close it, and you twist it back and fold it down flush. You also have your standard tripod socket. On the back, this little button here is what you use to press, and that releases your finder, and you can then swap it out with something a little bit newer or a waist level finder, what have you. You also have here your shutter speed, and it is simply adjusted here. And yeah, nice and simple. You got shutter speeds from 1 second to 1/2000th of a second plus bulb. Right on top here, this is where you set your film speed. It is simply a matter of pulling up the entire thing and twisting it around to your desired speed and letting it go. Right here, this is your shutter release. Like other older Nikons, this one does not take a standard shutter release cable, so you will need to either get a Nikon proprietary one, or you can use the shutter releases for older Barnack Leicas. They work really well in this case too. You also have the option to lock your shutter by pulling up the collar, twisting it to L, middle for standard, and T for time mode. Film advance here to power on the camera, just a simple flip out. This is great if you shoot like me, but if you are someone who holds it to your left eye, this is going to be a bit of an annoyance. What's also really nice about the DP1 Finder is that you have a second match needle right here on the top. You have your film rewind here along with the slides here. This is where you would fit the hot shoe accessory or a dedicated Nikon speed light for the camera. Up here at the front, you have your self timer, depth of field preview lever, a PC socket, so you can connect this to exterior strobes or a flash bulb. It doesn't really matter. And then right here is where this is your lens release. All right. So what you can see up here, that's the metering claw. That's the metering pin, so that will connect to your lens. And then it's just a simple matter of lining up, twisting. And the nice thing is that this has some level. You don't really have to do the shuffle the same way, but you kind of want to twist it all the way to one side first, and then you have the display of your aperture right here. So in this case, f2.8. All right, so that about covers it. There's a few other things that you can do with this camera. If I had other finders, I'd show you how to do that. But again, this camera is borrowed, so I really don't want to do anything that could potentially cause harm. So let's get this thing out into the field. Okay, so today I'm here in Oakville, Ontario in McCraney Valley. I have a Nikon F2 Photomic with my 24mm f2.8 AI lens mounted, a yellow filter, and it's loaded with Kodak TMax 400. I'm rating it at ASA 200, and I'm going to be developing it in Kodak D76 at a 1:3 dilution. All right, it is a beautiful winter's day here in the valley, and I could use some photography therapy while I talk to you about my experiences using the F2. All right, let's do this. If I could describe working with the F2 in a single word, that word would be smooth. Everything about this mechanical beast is smooth, from focusing, metering, to the film advance. If you've worked with the original F, you'll know that there are some strange quirks with that camera thanks to its foundation as a rangefinder. Nikon took all these things into consideration when building the F2. And if you can use a mechanical SLR from the 70s, you can hop right into the F2 without any difficulty. The camera has some weight to it, but not too much, especially in the stock form. The basic DP1 Finder offers up a clean picture with your shutter speed and aperture all displayed and easy to read. The one trouble I have is that the size of the match needle is pretty small for my tastes. But in being located in the bottom of the Finder, it makes it hard to keep your eyes on your scene while setting that exposure. But honestly, it isn't a deal breaker. Now, you can always update your metered head to find something a little more modern, like going with a DP2 or DP3, or just go all out with the DP12. You can add an MD2 motor drive that has a whole lot of weight, but honestly, I think the camera is better balanced without the drive, and you really only want one if you're using that 250 shot magazine. As a system camera, you can customize the f2 to however you want it to work. And for me, keeping things simple is the best way to go with the f2. It works well no matter what time of year, and even gloves on, you can easily work the controls. It's a camera that just seems to work. Okay, so that about wraps it up for the experience, but there's more than just the 24mm for the Nikon F2. So let's go back to the studio and I can talk about some excellent lens options to pair with this mechanical beauty, and I'll see you back. One of the best parts about the F2 is that you can use almost any Nikon lens on the camera. It all depends on the finder that you have. The original camera is designed around pre-AI Nikkor lenses, and if you're using a metered head, specifically the older units, you will need to use lenses that still have that metering claw attached to them. But the good news is that you have a great selection of AI and AIS lenses with such a claw that will work seamlessly with your f2. Of course, if you're using the newer DP11 or DP12 finders, you can natively use AI and AIS lenses without having that coupling claw. So what lenses would make a good kit for your f2? As I said, if you have existing manual focus lenses, you're in luck. But if you're starting from scratch and have an older f2 head, you can stick with those pre-AI lenses as they can be had for a far lower price. The examples that I'll be sharing are from modern AI and AIS lenses that I've used with the f2 in the past, but I'm also going to include the name of the pre-AI model below so that you can draw a direct line between the modern glass and the pre-AI version. So it's no surprise that one of my favorite lenses are ultra-wide lenses. So let's start there. Of course, there is the 20mm version of, there is a 20mm Nikkor lens out there, but I've never had a chance to use it, although I do have it on my wish list to eventually add. So let's start with the widest that I've shot with it, and that would be the 24mm f2.8. This is an awesome lens that gets the most amount of use for me these days, and I'm glad I've had the chance to use it now on an f2. This is a great option for landscape and architecture, especially if you like getting the big picture. And it doesn't matter if you're using the AI, AIS, or pre-AI versions, these are solid lenses that are well built. Now, I totally understand if 24mm is a bit too wide for some people, but you still like getting that wide angle look, then maybe take a step back and use a 28mm. This is a great wide angle choice that's available in a few aperture choices. If you're on a budget, and probably the best bang for your buck is to get the f3.5 version. Then there's also an f2.8 and an f2, being the most expensive. One of the best parts about these lenses is that the 28mm, no matter which aperture you get, they all share the same lens construction. It's just a matter of how fast you need that lens. And one of the best parts about the f3.5 version is that if you are shooting it wide open, you don't have the same sort of quirks or problems that you do with the faster lenses when shooting wide open, and that's fall off and vignetting at your corners. Of course, one of the best walk-around lenses these days is the 35mm focal length. It's not too wide as like a 28, but it's also not as narrow as your 50. And Nikon 35mm lenses of the f2 era are absolutely fantastic. They have a large lens construction with excellent optics, and you basically have a few options available. Of course, the top tier one is the f2 version. Personally, I love the 35mm f2 and its lens construction. Unfortunately, I do only have it in my autofocus kit, But there is also the budget option, which is f2.8. Now, if you are going with the AIS version, there is a later version that has a lower element count. But honestly, a lot of people say that it has a lower image quality. I haven't seen it myself. But the nice thing is, if you are using the pre-AI and AI version, it doesn't have that same problem and has the exact same lens construction as the f2 version. It just all depends on how much money you're willing to spend. And if you're feeling really bougie, you can go with the f1.4 version, but I kind of find that unnecessary, but it might be a lot of fun. It just depends on how you're feeling. Of course, for normal optics, you can't go wrong with a good old classic 50mm lens. Now, Nikon has again released several versions of their 50 in their pre-AI, AI, and AIS. You can honestly get a good deal on a 50mm f1.8. It is an absolutely fabulous lens. I've had a chance to use the 51.8 in both manual focus and autofocus. If you are feeling that you need something a little bit faster, there is of course the 50mm f1.4, which is the AIS lens that I've used the most with my f2. And if you want a really good deal on a classic lens that doesn't skimp on optical quality, there's always the 50mm f2 lens, and it does a really good job. I've had a chance to shoot it once with a Nikkor Mat FTN, and I can't doubt the image quality coming out for it. You really can't go wrong with any portrait length lens from Nikon. Probably the first choice for most photographers would be the 85mm focal length. Now, I have the 85mm f2 version in AIS, but unfortunately the coupling claw has been detached from that lens, and I haven't been able to put a replacement unit on it yet, but I am still working on getting that taken care of. I'm sure it would be absolutely fabulous for the f2. Of course, you can go with faster versions. They do have an f1.8 in manual focus, but you are going to be paying an awful lot more money for that focal length. Of course, there is the classic 105mm f2.5 lens. This one is a real workhorse. It is probably my favorite portrait length lens I have in my manual focus kit. It sees a lot of use. It's great for, of course, portraiture, a bit of architecture work, photojournalism, and street photography, and you really can't go wrong with it. Of course, you can go with the oldest version, which gives you the sonar design, but I would go one step up with a little more modern lens construction. It just gives slightly better quality in my opinion, but that could just be me. Of course, if the 105mm lens is a little too pricey for you, you can always look at the 135mm. Again, Nikon released several versions of this, such as a 3.5, 2.8, and 2. Honestly, nice middle ground f2.8 lens. It really won't go wrong. I personally overlooked this lens a lot more than I really should because it has really good optical quality. And when I have taken it out, especially on the f2, it has a nice amount of balance with just the DP1 base model f2, and I really get good images from it, especially if I need to be that little bit further away that the 105 and 85 just won't cut it. I need that extra reach, and then the 135 works great. I do need to get this lens out a little bit more and remember to bring it along when I have my manual focus kit. And finally, if you need just that little bit more reach, you can always go with the Nikkor 200mm f4. This offers up a great compact telephoto lens. It uses the same 52mm filter ring size, so there's that. It might be a little bit slow at f4, but it looks absolutely fabulous wide open, no matter how you shoot it in whatever conditions. I didn't get the chance to use it on the f2 simply because I don't need to use that focal length, that option. But if you need it, it is definitely a good option to add. Okay, so that covers it for today's video. The f2 is an absolutely fantastic camera, and the main reason I borrowed this from my good friend Bill Smith is I wanted to see if I wanted to put an f2 back into my collection. And you know what? There is still a temptation to do that. The problem is that prices vary so much with these cameras. You can get just the body without any accessories for relatively cheap. The problem is once you start buying the prism finders, that's where the cost sort of adds up. The best part is being a mechanical camera, they are still easily serviced by trained technicians and are relatively easy to do so because there's no real electronics other than in the metered finders. And don't even think about getting an unmetered finder because those things are super expensive. Another great part is that it takes a regular silver oxide battery rather than a mercury cell, meaning that you can buy batteries that still work in this camera today. And as I mentioned, there is a ton of glass available. So let me know in the comments, what are your thoughts on the F2? Which finder is your favorite? Do you prefer a metered finder or do you stick with the classic unmetered finder? And as always, throughout 2025, I've been collecting questions you have about me, my life, my photography, whatever. So leave those also in the comments with the hashtag AskALP, and I'll make sure, if possible, to answer it at the end of this year. And until next time, my friends, shoot what you love with what you love on what you love. Don't give in to the hype.